A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. The monster showed up just after midnight, as they do. Connor was awake when it came. He'd had a nightmare. Well, not a nightmare, the nightmare. The one he'd been having a lot lately. The one with the darkness and the wind and the screaming. The one with the hand slipping from his grasp, no matter how hard he tried to hold on. The one that always ended with, "Go away," Connor whispered into the darkness of his bedroom, trying to push the nightmare back, not let it follow him into the world of waking. "Go away now." He glanced over at the clock his mum had put on his bedside table. 12:07. 7 minutes past midnight, which was late for a school night. Late for a Sunday, certainly. He told no one about the nightmare. Not his mum, obviously, but no one else either. Not his dad in their fortnightly or so phone call. Definitely not his grandma, and no one at school. Absolutely not. What happened in the nightmare was something no one else ever needed to know. Connor blinked groggily at his room, and then he frowned. There was something he was missing. He sat up in his bed, waking a bit more. The nightmare was slipping from him, but there was something he couldn't put his finger on. Something different. Something... He listened, straining against the silence, but all he could hear was the quiet house around him, the occasional tick from the empty downstairs, or a rustle of bedding from his mum's room next door. Nothing. And then... something. Something he realised was the thing that had woken him. Someone was calling his name. Connor. He felt a rush of panic, his guts twisting. Had it followed him? Had it somehow stepped out of the nightmare and... "Don't be stupid," he told himself. "You're too old for monsters." And he was. He turned 13 just last month. Monsters were for babies. Monsters were for bedwetters. Monsters were for... Connor! There it was again. Connor swallowed. It had been an unusually warm October and his window was still open. Maybe the curtains shushing each other in the small breeze could have sounded like, "Connor!" All right, it wasn't the wind. It was definitely a voice, but not one he recognised. It wasn't his mother's, that was for sure. It wasn't a woman's voice at all. And he wondered for a crazy moment if his dad had somehow made a surprise trip from America and arrived too late to phone and... Connor! No, not his dad. His voice had a quality to it, a monstrous quality, wild and untamed. And he heard a heavy creak of wood outside, as if something gigantic was stepping across a timber floor. He didn't want to go and look, but at the same time a part of him wanted to look more than anything. Wide awake now, he pushed back the covers, got out of bed and went over to the window. In the pale half-light of the moon, he could clearly see the church tower on the small hill behind the house, the one with the train tracks curving beside it, 2 hard steel lines glowing dully in the night. The moon shone, too, on the graveyard attached to the church, filled with tombstones you could hardly read anymore. Connor could also see the great yew tree that rose from the centre of the graveyard, a tree so ancient it almost seemed to be out of the same stone as the church. He only knew it was a yew because his mother had told him, first when he was little to make sure he didn't eat the berries, which were poisonous, and again this past year, when she'd started staring out of the kitchen window with a funny look on her face and saying, "That's a yew tree, you know." And then he heard his name again. Connor. Like it was being whispered in both his ears. "What?" Connor said, his heart thumping, suddenly impatient for whatever was going to happen. A cloud moved in front of the moon, covering the whole landscape in darkness, and a whoosh of wind rushed down the hill and into his room, billowing the curtains. He heard the creaking and cracking of wood again, groaning like a living thing, like the hungry stomach of the world growling for a meal. Then the cloud passed and the moon shone again on the yew tree, which now stood firmly in the middle of his back garden. And here was the monster.